No mail-order bride lasted 1 week with the Amish man, until the fat one refused to leave. The town laughed every time another woman ran from his lonely ranch. They called him cursed, a man no bride could endure. But when one woman stepped off the train, heavyset and unshaken by the whispers, everything changed. She unpacked her trunk and stayed. At first, it seemed like stubbornness. Then came the truth. She carried debts from a father's past, and dangerous men were riding hard to collect. Dust on the road, hooves pounding, a cabin door rattling in the night. The law twisted against her, papers flashing like weapons. She wasn't just fighting to be a wife. She was fighting to keep her dignity, her home, and the only family she'd ever known. But when the riders returned with the law on their side, and the Amish man lay bloodied in the dirt, will she be torn away like all the rest, or will her refusal to leave change everything? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Colorado dawn broke bitter and gray over the train depot, where Levi Stoltzfus stood apart from the gathering crowd. His tall frame, clad in simple black wool, cast a long shadow across the frost-dusted platform. The whispers reached his ears like wind through dry grass. "That's him, the cursed one," murmured Sarah Miller to her friend. 3 brides, and not one stayed past a week. Levi kept his eyes fixed on the approaching train, its steam billowing white against the pewter sky. The iron wheels screamed against the rails as it shuddered to a stop. His hands, rough from work, clasped and unclasped behind his back, the only sign of his unease. Passengers began stepping down onto the platform. Last among them came a woman in a plain brown dress, her figure heavy set, her movements careful but determined. Olivia. She paused at the bottom step, gripping her worn carpet bag, while the station master wrestled her trunk from the baggage car. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. "Lord have mercy," someone said. "She ain't what you'd call a prize." Levi approached her, his boots crunching on the frost. "Welcome to Colorado territory," he said softly. "I can take that trunk for you." Olivia's eyes, clear and direct, met his. Without a word, she stepped forward and hoisted the trunk herself. The muscles in her arms tensed beneath her sleeves as she lifted it with practiced ease. Levi found himself standing there, hands still extended, watching with surprise as she settled the weight against her hip. "Which way to your wagon?" she asked simply. The drive to the homestead passed in silence, broken only by the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional snort of the horses. The winter bare cottonwoods stood like sentinels along the creek bed, their branches stark against the morning sky. After nearly an hour, Olivia spoke. "At least a cabin doesn't move like the orphanages did," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Always shifting us around, never knowing where we'd wake up next." Levi glanced at her, noting how she sat straight despite the rutted road, her hands folded quietly in her lap. Something in her calm acceptance made his chest tighten strangely. They reached the homestead as the sun climbed higher, casting weak light over the log cabin and the bare fields beyond. Levi helped her down from the wagon, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Inside, he showed her to the kitchen where a simple supper of bread and stew waited. They ate in silence until Levi cleared his throat. "Miss Olivia," he began, reaching into his vest pocket. "I feel I should be honest. The others, they didn't stay." He withdrew a small fold of bills. "If you'd prefer to leave, I can give you money for the return fare." "No shame in it." Olivia set down her spoon and looked at him steadily. Without a word, she rose from the table and walked to where her trunk waited by the door. Levi's heart sank, familiar disappointment settling over him like a heavy blanket. But instead of picking up the trunk to leave, she opened it and began removing her belongings, a few worn dresses, a Bible, a small frame holding a faded photograph. One by one, she carried them to the spare bedroom. Each time she passed him, still sitting at the table with the money in his hand, her steps were firm and certain. When the trunk was empty, she returned to her cooling bowl of stew and picked up her spoon again. "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Stoltzfus," she said quietly. "Unless you mean to send me away yourself." Levi stared at her, something like wonder stirring in his chest. Later that night, after Olivia had retired to her room, he knelt by his bed in the lamplight. The flame cast dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls as he bowed his head in prayer. "Lord," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't understand your ways. 3 times you've seen fit to leave this house empty. Now you send this woman, not what I expected, but," he paused, struggling with the words. "She has strength in her, Lord, and courage. I find myself torn between doubt and hope." The lamp flickered, sending shadows across his weathered face as he continued his silent communion. Outside, a night wind sighed through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its mate. Dawn's first light found Olivia already awake, pulling her shawl tight against the morning chill as she made her way to the kitchen. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet as she approached the cookstove, only to find a small figure already there. Anna Stoltzfus stood on tiptoe, struggling to reach the flour bin. Her thin shoulders tensed at Olivia's approach, and she drew back like a startled deer. "Good morning," Olivia said softly, keeping her distance. "I reckon we both had the same idea about breakfast." She smiled, noticing flour dusting Anna's nose. "Though it seems the flour's been giving you some trouble." Anna's eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her fingers twisting in her apron. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Papa likes biscuits. Does he now?" Olivia moved slowly to the flour bin, careful not to crowd the girl. "My pa was partial to them too, though sometimes mine turned out hard as horseshoes." She chuckled at the memory. Once, he tried using one to hammer a loose nail. A tiny smile flickered across Anna's face. "There and gone like summer lightning. Would you like to show me how you make them?" Olivia asked, settling onto a kitchen chair. "I might learn something." Anna hesitated, then nodded. As she gathered ingredients, her movements grew less rigid. Soon, the kitchen filled with the warm scent of baking bread and the soft sounds of their work. Later that morning, Olivia tackled the outdoor chores. She fed chickens with steady hands and managed the milk cow without complaint. But when it came to working with the plow mule, her breath came in heavy gasps, and sweat dampened her collar despite the cool air. Levi watched from the barn door, noting how she pressed on despite her obvious fatigue. When the mule began acting stubborn, he stepped forward to help, but Olivia had already coaxed it back into line with quiet words and a gentle touch. The afternoon sun hung low when Bishop Yoder's buggy appeared on the road. His arrival sent Anna scurrying inside while Levi straightened his coat and went to greet him. The bishop's stern figure cut an imposing shadow as he stepped down. "Brother Stoltzfus," he said, his voice grave. "We must speak." Olivia, resting on the porch after her work with the mule, saw them walk toward the barn. Though they spoke in low voices, the wind carried fragments of their conversation. 3 times. "Levi," the bishop's words were sharp with disapproval. 3 times you have brought shame upon. They left of their own choosing. Levi's reply was quiet but firm. "And if this one leaves too?" The bishop's voice rose slightly. "The community cannot endure another scandal. If she fails as the others did, you will be forbidden to send for another bride. Do you understand?" Levi's silence spoke volumes. Olivia's hands tightened in her lap as the weight of the bishop's words settled over her. Not just her future hung in the balance, but Levi's as well. That evening, supper was a quiet affair. Anna had retreated to her room, leaving Olivia and Levi alone at the table. The lamplight cast soft shadows on the walls as they finished their meal. "Faith isn't easy," Levi said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Especially when trust has been broken." Olivia looked up from her plate. "No," she agreed softly. "But sometimes the hardest ground yields the strongest crops." She paused, choosing her words carefully. I heard what the bishop said. Levi's shoulders tensed, but he didn't speak. I want you to know, Olivia continued, that I meant what I said yesterday. I'm not leaving unless you send me away. Not leaving unless you send me away. After supper, Olivia kneaded bread by the dying fire. The familiar rhythm of pushing and folding the dough helped steady her thoughts. The warmth of the hearth seeped into her bones, and the yeasty smell reminded her of other kitchens, other times when she had found comfort in simple tasks. Levi passed through on his way to check the animals one last time. He paused in the doorway, watching as Olivia's strong hands worked the dough with sure movements. The lamplight caught the determination in her face, the quiet dignity in her bearing. Something stirred in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling, seeing life and purpose in rooms that had known only emptiness for so long. The sound of her, humming a hymn, followed him out into the night, a gentle counterpoint to the silence that had ruled his home for far too long. 2 days passed, in a rhythm of shared chores and quiet meals. The morning sun had barely cleared the mountains when hoofbeats echoed across the yard. A travel-worn courier dismounted, waving a letter. Olivia stood at the wash basin, her hands deep in sudsy water. Through the window, she recognized the slanted handwriting on the envelope, and her heart sank. Her brother-in-law never wrote with good news. "I'll fetch it," Levi offered, reaching for his hat. "No," Olivia dried her hands on her apron. "It's addressed to me." "I should." She squared her shoulders and walked outside. The courier tipped his hat, handed over the letter, and was gone before the dust settled. Olivia turned the envelope over in her hands, reluctant to break the seal. Anna watched from the doorway, curious but silent, while Levi paused in his work. Sensing Olivia's uneasy back inside, they gathered at the kitchen table. The morning light streamed through the windows, making the paper glow as Olivia smoothed it flat. Her voice trembled slightly as she began to read aloud. "Dear sister," she started, then cleared her throat. "I write with grave news. Father's debts remain unsettled, despite our best efforts. The creditors grow impatient. There are men," she paused, swallowing hard, "men who speak of riding west to claim what is owed. I fear they mean to find you." Levi's frown deepened as he listened. He'd seen bounty riders before, men who twisted the law like rope to bind their victims. They carried papers that looked official, but held no true authority, counting on fear and isolation to do their work. "I won't run," Olivia said firmly, folding the letter with steady hands. "I've spent too many years moving from place to place. If they come, they come." Anna's small hand crept across the table to touch Olivia's arm. The gesture, so unexpected from the shy child, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. That evening, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Wind rattled the cabin windows as Olivia and Levi sat by the fire, Anna already asleep upstairs. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as Levi spoke of Amish ways, his voice soft but certain. "We believe in diecraft a stillheit, the power of quietness," he explained, adding wood to the fire. "You may have noticed there are no guns displayed here, no weapons meant to intimidate." Olivia nodded, watching the flames. "I've seen how your people live. The strength in your community, the way you help each other. It's more than that," Levi continued. "We trust in a deeper strength, not the kind that comes from force or threats, but from standing firm in what we believe." Thunder rolled in the distance as Olivia considered his words. "I respect your ways, Levi," she said carefully. "But I've seen men who ride for coin. They don't stop for quiet strength. They don't listen to reason when there's money to be made." The wind howled outside, making the flames dance wildly. Levi's face showed the struggle between his beliefs and the reality of the threat they faced. "These men," he said slowly, "they will have papers?" "Papers that look real enough to fool most folks," Olivia confirmed. "They'll claim they have the right to take me east, to work off the debt in their factories." Her voice hardened. "But I won't go." I won't let them destroy what I've found here. Levi stood abruptly, needing to move. The walls felt too close, the wind too loud with warning. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside into the gusting storm. The wind whipped at his clothes as he stared at the sky. Lightning flickered between the clouds, illuminating the vast emptiness around their small homestead. His mind churned with worry, not just for the peace of his home and his daughter's safety, but for Olivia herself. She had brought life back to their quiet rooms, warmth to their meals, and a gentle persistence that was slowly healing old wounds. Yet now her past threatened to upend everything. The bishop's warning echoed in his thoughts. They could not afford another failure, another scandal. But as he watched the storm clouds race across the sky, Levi realized this was different. Olivia wasn't running, she was standing her ground. The question that troubled him now was how much that stand might cost them. All that dawn broke in shades of pewter, painting the homestead in muted tones. Olivia stood at the kitchen window, watching Levi prepare the plow horse in the early light. Her hands still ached from yesterday's work, but she straightened her apron with determination. "I want to help with the plowing," she announced, stepping out into the cool morning air. The dew dampened her boots as she crossed the yard. Levi paused, one hand on the horse's bridle. "The ground is hard after the storm. It will be difficult work." "I'm not afraid of difficult," Olivia replied, taking hold of the plow handles. The rough wood bit into her palms, but she kept her grip firm. They worked in companionable silence, breaking the earth row by row. Within an hour, Olivia's hands were raw and beginning to blister. She gritted her teeth, refusing to complain, but Levi noticed her discomfort. Without a word, he pulled a pair of worn leather gloves from his pocket and held them out. Olivia accepted them with a grateful nod, touched by the simple gesture. The gloves were too large, but they protected her tender skin as they continued their work. By midday, clouds had gathered again, though the rain held off. Olivia retreated to the cabin's warmth, where Anna sat quietly at the kitchen table with her primer. The girl's solemn face brightened slightly as Olivia settled beside her. "Would you like to hear some stories while we rest?" Olivia asked, reaching for her own worn Bible. Anna nodded, scooting her chair closer. Olivia's voice filled the cabin as she shared tales of Daniel's courage, of David's trust, and finally, her favorite story of angels walking among men unaware. Her hands moved expressively as she spoke, bringing the ancient words to life. "My mother used to say angels still walk with us," Olivia confided, watching Anna's rapt expression. "Sometimes in storms, sometimes in sunshine, always watching over those who need them most." Anna's eyes widened. "Even here?" "Especially here," Olivia assured her, and felt a small thrill of joy when Anna's hand slipped trustingly into hers. The afternoon passed peacefully. By supper time, the cabin glowed with lamplight and the savory smell of stew. They gathered around the table, and for the first time, it felt natural like family. Levi offered a quiet prayer of thanks, his voice warm in the golden light. The peaceful moment shattered at the sound of approaching hooves, hard and fast on the packed earth. Levi rose quickly, moving to the window. Two riders emerged from the gathering dusk, their horses lathered from hard riding. Heavy boots thundered on the porch steps. The knock that followed was more like a punch against the wood. "Open up!" a rough voice commanded. "We got business here." Levi opened the door but remained firmly in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Two men stood there, trail-dusty and grim-faced. The taller one thrust a paper toward Levi's face. "We're here for Olivia Matthews," the man declared. "She's got debts to settle. Coming with us to work it off proper in town. A saloon kitchen needs help," the second man added with an ugly smile. "Fair work for fair pay, till the debt's cleared." Olivia had moved to stand behind Levi, one hand steadying herself against the wall. Anna pressed close to her skirts, trembling. "She is my lawful wife," Levi stated firmly. his voice level but carrying steel beneath the calm. "She stays here," the first man spat into the dust. "Ain't no frontier court recognizes your Amish contracts, friend. Best step aside and let us conclude our business." "The law," Levi began. "We are the law out here," the second man cut in. "And that woman owes money. Now we can do this easy, or we can do this hard." Olivia felt ice in her veins, but she lifted her chin. "I won't go with you." The men exchanged dark looks. "We'll be back," the taller one promised. "With more papers, more men." "You think on that?" They turned their horses, kicking up dirt as they galloped away. Their hoof beats faded into the gathering night, leaving behind a heavy silence. Olivia's legs gave way, and she sank into a kitchen chair. Silent tears tracked down her cheeks, glinting in the lamplight. Levi closed and barred the door before turning to her. "You will not be taken," he said, his quiet voice carrying absolute conviction. The lamplight flickered across his face as he met her tear-filled gaze. "I give you my word." Olivia nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. Above them, thunder growled a warning of another approaching storm. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cabin yard as Olivia threw herself into her chores with fierce determination. Her movements were deliberate, each task attacked with renewed purpose after the previous night's confrontation. She fed the chickens with quick efficiency, hauled water from the well without complaint, and scrubbed the breakfast dishes until they gleamed. Levi watched from the barn doorway as she wrestled with an armload of wet linens, hanging them with sharp snaps on the line. There was something different in her bearing today, a steel beneath the softness that commanded attention. By mid-morning, Olivia had settled on the porch with a pile of worn harness leather that needed mending. Her thick fingers worked the awl with surprising dexterity, pushing the heavy needle through resistant layers. Levi brought her fresh water, lingering longer than necessary. "Most folks see my size and decide what I'm worth right then," Olivia said quietly, not looking up from her stitching. In the orphanage, in the workhouses, always the same judgment. Too big, too plain, too much of everything, except what they wanted. Her hands remained steady on the leather as she continued. "But here I feel seen. Not invisible, not wrong, just here." She tied off a neat knot and finally raised her eyes to meet his. "That's worth fighting for, I reckon." Levi stood silent, struck by the quiet dignity in her words. He'd seen her competence, her gentle way with Anna, but this raw honesty revealed something deeper, a strength forged by years of weathering others. Cruelty. The afternoon brought Henry, their Ute neighbor, riding up with a wrapped package of smoked venison. His usually cheerful face was grave as he dismounted. "Those men who came last night, they're still around," Henry said, following Levi into the barn. "Saw them drinking at Walker's saloon, bragging about dragging a woman east." He secured his horse's reins to a post. "They're gathering more men." Levi's jaw tightened as he absorbed this news. Through the barn door, they could see Olivia teaching Anna how to hang herbs to dry, their heads bent close together in the autumn sunlight. "She belongs here now," Levi said softly. Henry nodded. "Then we must make sure she stays." He clasped Levi's shoulder. "My father taught me that true neighbors stand together, even when the path is hard. If trouble comes, you won't face it alone." That evening, they gathered around the supper table, the smoked venison adding a rich warmth to their meal. Anna sat closer to Olivia than usual, their shoulders nearly touching as they broke bread together. Henry's presence filled the cabin with an air of protection, his steady voice relating tales of recent hunting trips and spring planting plans. "Sometimes," Henry said, carefully cutting his meat, "friendship asks more of us than quiet acceptance. Sometimes it demands courage." His dark eyes met Levi's across the table. "I have seen you be that kind of friend to others, brother. Now perhaps it is time to accept such friendship in return." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Levi's customary silence felt different, now not withdrawal, but consideration. Finally he nodded, a gesture small but significant dot after Henry departed and Anna was tucked into bed. Olivia lingered in the kitchen, putting away the last of the dishes. Through the thin walls she heard Levi's voice, soft but clear, raised in evening prayer. "Lord, protect this home," he whispered. "Guard those you have brought under this roof. Give me wisdom to know the right path, and strength to walk it." The crack in his usual stoic demeanor touched something deep in Olivia's heart. She moved quietly to Anna's bedroom, where the girl lay curled beneath her quilt. Kneeling beside the bed, Olivia gently stroked Anna's dark hair. "God brought me here for more than fear," she whispered, as much to herself as to the sleeping child. "He brought me home." 3 days passed in quiet routine before necessity drove them toward town. The morning dawned crisp and clear as Levi helped Olivia load the wagon with carefully packed butter and fresh eggs. Anna climbed up between them, her small frame dwarfed by Olivia's substantial presence on the wooden seat. Wagon wheels creaked along the rutted road into town, where the morning bustle was already in full swing. As they pulled up near the mercantile, heads turned. Whispers floated on the autumn air like dying leaves. "That's her, the fourth one, big as a barn door. Don't reckon she'll last neither. Poor Stoltzfus, cursed with another failure waiting to happen." Olivia's chin lifted slightly, but her face remained serene as she climbed down from the wagon. Her boots struck the dirt with quiet determination. Levi watched as she straightened her plain dress and offered her hand to help Anna down, her movements deliberate and dignified. Inside the mercantile, the floorboards groaned beneath Olivia's weight. Mrs. Henderson, the shopkeeper's wife, pursed her lips as she counted out payment for the butter and eggs. "These seem a mite small," she sniffed, examining an egg with exaggerated care. "Perhaps your hens need someone more delicate, tending them." Her eyes flicked meaningfully over Olivia's broad frame. "The eggs are fresh and true to size." "Mrs. Henderson," Olivia replied evenly, her voice carrying the same gentle strength that marked her movements. "Just like the good Lord made them perfect in their own way." Levi, arranging farm tools on the counter, felt something stir in his chest at her words. He'd seen others crumble under the town's cruel judgment, but Olivia stood firm. Like a mountain weathering wind, Anna drifted toward the fabric display, her small fingers trailing over bolts of calico and muslin. Olivia joined her, naming the colors softly sky blue, meadow green, sunset pink. Their quiet moment of peace shattered when heavy boots scraped the wooden floor behind them. One of the bounty riders from before stood in the doorway, his hat tipped at a mocking angle. "Ma'am," he drawled, eyes fixed on Olivia. "Still playing at being a proper wife, I see. Enjoy it while you can." He spat tobacco juice on the floor and sauntered out, leaving tension thick as storm clouds in his wake. Anna pressed against Olivia's skirts, trembling. Without missing a beat, Olivia began to hum soft and low at first, then growing stronger. The familiar notes of Amazing Grace filled the store, drowning out the lingering echo of the rider's threats. The wagon ride home stretched longer than the morning journey. Olivia's humming continued, weaving hymn after hymn into the afternoon air. Anna's shoulders gradually relaxed, and even Levi found himself breathing easier to the gentle rhythm of her voice. Evening settled around the cabin like a worn quilt. The familiar sense of beef stew and fresh bread filled the kitchen as they gathered for supper. Olivia had shaped the loaf with the same care she brought to everything: smooth top, perfectly browned crust. They ate in silence, broken only by the clink of spoons and the pop of the cooking fire. Levi's thoughts kept returning to the mercantile, to Olivia's quiet strength in the face of mockery. The tune she'd hummed still echoed in his mind, carrying whispers of grace and redemption. He watched as she buttered a slice of bread for Anna, noting how his daughter leaned into the simple gesture of care. After the dishes were cleared, they settled by the hearth. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor, working on her sampler. Olivia's knitting needles clicked softly as she shaped a winter scarf. Levi held his Bible, though its pages remained closed on his lap. The firelight played across their faces. 3 people brought together by circumstance, now sharing this moment of fragile peace. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The warmth of belonging filled the spaces between them, stronger than the shadows pressing against the window glass. Outside, an owl called into the gathering dark. Inside, the fire crackled, sparks dancing up the chimney like prayers. Olivia's knitting needles kept their steady rhythm, each stitch another thread binding them together as family. Despite the storm they all knew was coming. The night hung still and cold when the dog's barking jolted Levi from sleep. Sharp, urgent yaps pierced the darkness, not their usual alert for coyotes or deer. His bare feet hit the wooden floor as shadows moved past the window. Boots crunched on frozen grass outside. The dog's barking rose to frenzied pitch, then cut off with yelps of fear. Levi's heart hammered as he pulled on his trousers and shirt. "Come on out, Stoltzfus." A rough voice carried through the thin walls. "Time to settle this proper." Olivia appeared in her doorway, shawl clutched around her nightdress. Anna clung to her skirts, eyes wide with terror. Levi gestured them back into the bedroom. "Stay inside," he whispered. "Bar the door, Bird. Bar the door." The porch boards creaked beneath his feet as he stepped out. 2 mounted figures loomed in the yard, their horses dancing nervously. Moonlight glinted off metal at their hips. "Evening, friend," the taller rider sneered. "Brought some papers from back east. Says this woman owes considerable debt. Time she came with us to work it off proper. She is my wife," Levi said firmly, though his hands trembled. "Under God's law and man's. Leave my property. Ain't your property we're after." The second rider spat. "Just the fat girl playing at being a wife. Step aside, or..." A rifle's distinctive click cut through the night. Henry materialized from the shadows near the barn, his Winchester leveled steady. "You boys lost?" Henry's voice carried quiet authority. "Trail to town's that way." He jerked his chin toward the road. The riders' hands twitched toward their guns, but Henry's aim never wavered. After a long moment, the taller one forced a laugh. "Well now, didn't figure you for keeping armed company, Stoltzfus. That ain't very Christian of you. The Lord helps those who help their neighbors," Henry replied evenly. "Best ride on while you can." Tension crackled like static before a storm. Finally, the riders reined their horses around. "This ain't finished," the second man called over his shoulder. "That debt's still owing, one way or other." Hoofbeats faded into darkness. Henry lowered his rifle, and Levi released a shaky breath. "Much obliged," he managed stiffly. The words felt strange in his mouth. Gratitude for violence, even threatened, went against his beliefs. Yet he couldn't deny the necessity. Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. Family's worth protecting. Any way needed. Inside they found Olivia kneeling beside Anna's bed. Her low voice carried the familiar words of the Lord's Prayer, steady and soothing. Anna's small hands were clasped in Olivia's larger ones, her tears gradually slowing as the prayer continued. "Our Father, who art in heaven." The ancient words filled the room with peace, pushing back the night's shadows. Levi and Henry stood silent in the doorway until the final Amen. Dawn arrived pale and uncertain. Henry had insisted on staying until first light, keeping watch from the porch. Now he shouldered his rifle, declining Olivia's offer of breakfast. "Got my own chores waiting," he said simply. "Send word if you need me." His eyes met Levi's. Both men nodded, a depth of understanding passing between them. As morning chores began, Anna refused to leave Olivia's side. She followed like a shadow as Olivia fed chickens and gathered eggs, clutching her skirts at the slightest sound from the road. "You're safe, little one," Olivia murmured, stroking Anna's hair. "God sends angels to watch over us. Sometimes they look just like neighbors with rifles." That earned a tiny smile from Anna. She helped Olivia carry eggs into the house. their hands linked as naturally as any mother and daughter. Later, Levi found Olivia in the barn, measuring oats for the horses. Pale sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls, catching dust motes in golden beams. They worked in comfortable silence until Levi cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For Anna, she needs," he gestured vaguely, struggling to express the ache of watching his daughter bloom under Olivia's care. "She needs a mother," Olivia finished. "And I need a family." She met his eyes steadily. "Perhaps God knew what he was about, sending me here. Perhaps." Levi's voice softened. "I've prayed for guidance. For Anna's sake. He hesitated. "For mine as well." Olivia's smile dawned slowly, like sunrise over the mountains. "Then we'll trust his wisdom. And build whatever he intends." Their eyes held for a moment longer. Something new passed between them, fragile as a butterfly's wing, yet strong as Henry's rifle. Hope, perhaps. Or the first trembling notes of love's possibility. A faint smile touched Levi's lips, mirrored in Olivia's own. Though danger still lurked beyond their fence line, here in the barn's quiet morning light, they had found something worth protecting. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows as Henry sat at their kitchen table, his weathered hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee. His expression was grave as he shared what he'd learned in town. "Those writers been asking questions at the courthouse," he said. "Looking for ways to make their claims seem legal. Papers can be twisted, especially out here where judges are few." Levi's shoulders tensed. He stood by the hearth, conflict etched across his features. "Our ways teach peace," he said softly. "To resist not evil, but to stand idle while they threaten. Sometimes standing firm is not the same as violence." Olivia spoke up from where she kneaded bread dough. Flour dusted her arms as she worked the mass with steady movements. "I won't let fear of them drive me from Anna or from here." Her voice carried quiet determination despite the shadows under her eyes. Henry nodded slowly. "A mother bear shows her teeth to protect her cubs. Doesn't mean she seeks the fight." Anna appeared in the doorway then, clutching her rag doll. Olivia quickly wiped her hands on her apron and opened her arms. The child ran to her embrace without hesitation. "What if they come back?" Anna whispered against Olivia's skirts. "Then we'll face them in God's good daylight," Olivia answered, smoothing Anna's hair. "Together. Like family should." Later that afternoon, while Levi mended fence posts, Olivia led Anna to a sunny meadow near the cabin. Purple and yellow wildflowers nodded in the breeze. "See these pretty ones?" Olivia plucked several stems. "My mother taught me how to weave them just so." Her fingers moved deftly, plaiting the flowers into a delicate circle. Like making a crown fit for a princess, Anna watched, fascinated. "Can you teach me?" "Of course, sweetheart." Olivia guided Anna's small hands. "Gentle now. Tuck this stem here, then wrap the next one around." Soon they sat surrounded by scattered blooms, Anna's tongue poking out in concentration as she attempted her own crown. When she finally succeeded, her triumphant laugh rang across the meadow like silver bells. Levi looked up from his work at the sound. He stood motionless, drinking in the sight of his daughter's joy. Anna hadn't laughed like that since before her mother died. Now she glowed with happiness as Olivia set the crooked flower crown upon her head. "There now," Olivia declared. "Pretty as any princess in a storybook. Make one for yourself." Anna insisted, gathering more flowers. "Well, if you say so, Your Highness." Olivia's eyes twinkled as she began weaving another crown. From his vantage point, Levi watched them work together, heads bent close in shared purpose. Something warm unfurled in his chest. This was what home should feel like. That evening, they gathered by the hearth after supper. Anna proudly showed Henry her flower-weaving skills before heading to bed, her precious crown carefully placed on her bedside table. "She's blooming like those meadow flowers," Henry observed quietly. "Good medicine, having a mother's touch again." He bid them good night shortly after. Olivia sat in the rocking chair, finishing some mending by lamplight. I never thought I'd find such peace here, she mused. Even with those men threatening, peace comes in unexpected ways, Levi replied. He paused, then added with the ghost of a smile, like finding princesses in my meadow. Olivia's startled laugh filled the room. Oh, you saw that? Hard to miss such royal goings-on. His own chuckle joined hers, rusty but genuine. Their shared laughter seemed to lighten the very air. Olivia's eyes met his, warm with something more than firelight. For a moment, they simply gazed at each other, awareness sparking between them like tinder catching flame. The moment broke when Levi rose to close the shutters for the night. His hand froze on the wooden slat as movement caught his eye. Dark shapes shifted against the twilight sky along the ridge. Olivia, he called softly. Come away from the window. She joined him, her breath catching as she too spotted the watching shadows. The dread they'd briefly forgotten came rushing back, heavy as storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Without speaking, they finished securing the shutters. The lamplight seemed dimmer now. The warmth of their laughter faded. Yet when Olivia's hand brushed Levi's in passing, neither pulled away immediately. Whatever watched from the darkness, they would face it together. For Anna's sake. For the family they were becoming. For the love beginning to blossom between them. Fragile yet determined as meadow flowers pushing through rocky soil. 2 days after the flower crowns withered, darkness crept across the Colorado foothills. The evening started peacefully enough. Olivia had just finished helping Anna washed the supper dishes when hoofbeats thundered through the twilight. 3 horses approached the cabin, kicking up dust in the fading light. Levi rose from his chair by the hearth, placing himself between his family and the door. The wooden planks creaked as heavy boots climbed the porch steps. A sharp knock rattled the frame. Open up, Stoltzfus. The bounty rider's voice carried the weight of assumed authority. Got something here you need to see. Levi opened the door just wide enough to block the entrance with his body. The lead rider thrust a paper toward him, the edges crumpled and stained. Marshal's orders, he sneered. Legal right to collect on debts owed. The woman comes with us. I will read it first, Levi said firmly, taking the document. The lamplight caught the official-looking seal as his eyes moved across the words. His brow furrowed deeper with each line. This paper, he began. But the riders had lost patience. The leader lunged forward, shoving the door hard against Levi's shoulder. The other 2 men pushed past, their boots thundering on the wooden floor. Anna screamed and darted behind Olivia, who backed toward the kitchen table. Enough reading, the first rider growled. He swung without warning, his fist connecting with Levi's jaw. The impact sent Levi staggering. Before he could recover, another blow caught him in the ribs. Stop! Olivia cried out. Please! Levi tried to rise, but a boot to his side drove him back down. The paper fluttered from his hand, landing in a patch of spilled lamplight. Blood trickled from his split lip as he struggled to push himself up. Leave him be. Anna's terrified voice pierced the chaos. She broke free from Olivia's grasp, running toward her fallen father. One of the riders caught her arm, yanking her back roughly. Don't touch her. Olivia surged forward, maternal instinct overriding fear. She managed to pull Anna free, pushing the child behind her skirts. I'll go with you, she said, her voice trembling but determined. Just don't hurt them anymore, Olivia. No, Levi gasped through bloodied lips. Trying once more to rise, the leader grabbed Olivia's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. Smart choice, woman. Though we'd have taken you anyway. He jerked her toward the door while the other men kept Levi down. Anna, stay with your father, Olivia called out, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Be brave, sweetheart. They dragged her out into the night. The sound of her struggles faded, replaced by the thunder of hooves as the riders headed toward town with their captive. Inside the cabin, Anna knelt beside Levi, her small hands touching his bruised face. "Papa, please get up," she begged. "They're taking her away." Levi's eyes were distant with pain and something deeper, defeat. "Perhaps," he whispered, "perhaps God never meant me to have a wife." The words carried all the weight of his losses. Anna's mother, 3 failed brides, and now Olivia. "No." Anna's voice rose in desperate protest. Her fingers clutched at her father's shirt. "Don't say that. Don't give up." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pleaded. "Don't let her be taken like Mama was." The child's words hung in the air, heavy with memory and fear. Outside, an owl called mournfully into the darkness that had swallowed Olivia. The cabin felt suddenly hollow, as if all the warmth and hope she had brought had been stolen away with her. Anna continued to kneel beside her father, her voice growing smaller but no less urgent. "Please, Papa, please." Each word was a prayer, begging him not to surrender to the silence that threatened to fill their home once more. The lamp sputtered, casting wavering shadows across Levi's battered face. Blood still trickled from his lip, and his breathing came in painful gasps. But in his daughter's pleading eyes, he saw the reflection of all they stood to lose, not just Olivia, but the family they had begun to become. The marshal's paper lay forgotten on the floor, its official seal gleaming dully in the lamplight. Whatever claims it held, whatever justice it promised to uphold, it could not capture the truth of what these men had truly stolen. Not just a woman to pay a debt, but a mother, a wife, the heart of their home. The first gray light of dawn crept through the cabin windows, finding Levi still on the floor where the bounty riders had left him. His body ached with each shallow breath, ribs protesting as he tried to push himself up. Anna slept fitfully beside him, her small hand clutching his shirt. Tear tracks dried on her cheeks. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made Levi tense, but these were different, steady, purposeful. Henry's familiar silhouette appeared in the doorway, his keen eyes taking in the scene. "I followed their trail," Henry said quietly, helping Levi to his feet. "They've got her at the Golden Nugget Saloon, up in the rooms above." Levi swayed, steadying himself against the table. "I failed her," he whispered. "Failed them both." Henry's weathered face hardened. "No, you're still standing. That means you haven't failed yet." He gripped Levi's shoulder. "But if you surrender now, you will." Levi touched his split lip, wincing. "What would you have me do?" "I cannot fight. Not alone," Henry agreed. "But you have neighbors, community." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Even that stern bishop of yours might surprise you, if you ask." Levi looked down at Anna, still sleeping. The sight of her clinging to him, even in sleep, stirred something deep within. "Watch over her?" he asked Henry. At Henry's nod, Levi limped to the barn, hitching his wagon with painful slowness. Each movement sent spikes of pain through his ribs, but he pressed on. The morning air was crisp as he drove toward the closest Amish farms, stopping at each homestead. Some neighbors looked skeptical, others concerned, but one by one they hitched their own wagons. The sun had climbed higher when Levi finally approached Bishop Yoder's home. The elder stood on his porch, already aware of Levi's purpose. His stern face showed no emotion as Levi painfully dismounted. "You come seeking help for this woman?" the bishop asked. "For my wife," Levi corrected quietly. "And for justice," Bishop Yoder studied Levi's bruised face. "These men, they used violence?" "Yes." Levi met his gaze steadily. "But I seek no vengeance. Only to bring her home, where she belongs." The bishop was silent for a long moment. "And you believe she belongs with us?" "With you?" "She has proven herself steadfast," Levi said. "More than I deserved." Something shifted in Bishop Yoder's expression. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time our community proved itself steadfast as well." He turned toward his barn. "I will hitch my wagon." Soon a line of wagons wound their way toward town. a quiet show of strength and unity. Levi rode at the front, each jolt of the wagon testing his injuries, but his spine was straight. Henry rode alongside on horseback, a bridge between two worlds. Meanwhile, in a stuffy room above the Golden Nugget Saloon, Olivia knelt beside a narrow bed. Dust motes danced in the thin sunlight filtering through grimy windows. Her captors had locked her in at dawn, confident she could not escape. "Lord," she prayed aloud, her voice barely above a whisper, "grant me strength. Not for myself, but for Anna, who needs a mother's love. For Levi, who deserves to trust again." She touched the crude wooden cross hanging from her neck. "Help me be worthy of the family you've given me." The door creaked, making her start. But it was only one of the saloon girls, slipping inside with a cup of water. The young woman's eyes were kind as she pressed the cup into Olivia's hands. "Drink," she whispered. "Keep your strength up," Olivia sipped gratefully. "Thank you." The girl glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "Men like them," she murmured, nodding toward where the bounty riders drank below. "They look at women like you and see only size. They forget something important." "What's that?" Olivia asked. A faint smile touched the girl's lips. "Big women are strong women. We carry more than just weight, we carry endurance." She squeezed Olivia's hand. "Don't let them make you feel small." The words settled deep in Olivia's heart, a truth she had always known but sometimes forgotten. She thought of how she had lifted her own trunk at the depot, how she had worked the plow despite blistered hands, how she had stood tall against town gossip. The girl slipped away, leaving Olivia alone again. But now she held herself differently, her shoulders straight despite her fear. Below, she could hear the bounty riders laughing, celebrating their victory too soon. They thought they had captured a woman too large, too plain, too unwanted to fight back. They were wrong. Olivia gripped the cup tightly, letting its solid reality anchor her. Whatever trial lay ahead, she would face it with the strength that had always been within her, the strength to endure, to love, to become family against all odds. She began to pray again, but this time her voice was steady, filled with quiet determination. The morning light grew stronger, promising that this day was far from over. By mid-morning, the line of wagons rolled into town, wheels crunching on the hard-packed dirt of Main Street. Townsfolk stopped to stare at the unusual sight. A procession of Amish vehicles, led by Levi Stoltzfus, his face bruised but determined, with Henry riding alongside on horseback. The marshal stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by the two bounty riders. His expression soured as he watched the wagons approach. Inside the Golden Nugget Saloon, Olivia heard the commotion and pressed her face to the grimy window, her heart leaping at the sight of Levi. "Time to go, woman," one of the bounty riders called up the stairs. "Train east leaves at noon." Bishop Yoder was the first to dismount, his dignity commanding attention despite his plain clothes. "We demand a proper hearing," he announced, his voice carrying across the street. "Before the law and before God. Before the law and before God." The marshal shifted uncomfortably. "These men have legal papers. Then let a judge examine them," Levi interrupted, stepping forward despite his pain. "Today, now." A crowd began gathering, drawn by the spectacle. The marshal glanced between the determined faces of the Amish group and the scowling bounty riders. Finally he nodded curtly. "Judge Wilson's inside. But don't waste his time." They brought Olivia down from the saloon, her wrists bound with rough rope. The sight made Levi's jaw clench, but he held his peace. As they approached the courthouse steps, Anna broke free from Henry's watchful care and ran to Olivia. "Mama!" she cried, reaching for her hand. The marshal moved to stop her, but Olivia had already caught the child's fingers in her own. She bent down, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I will not leave you," she whispered fiercely. "Trust in that little one." The courthouse filled quickly with curious onlookers. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. Judge Wilson, a lean man with shrewd eyes, surveyed the unusual gathering from his bench. "What's all this about?" he demanded, tapping his gavel for order. The bounty riders stepped forward first, presenting their papers with smug confidence. "Simple matter, Your Honor. This woman's father died owing significant debts. We have authority to collect through contracted labor. By forcing her to work in a saloon?" Henry's voice cut through the murmurs. He stood, his bearing proud despite the sidelong glances from some townspeople. "I witnessed these men threaten violence. Watched them beat an unarmed man on his own land." The judge frowned, studying the papers. "These seem in order, though." He squinted at several lines. "There are irregularities in the amounts." Olivia sat ramrod straight in her chair, trembling slightly but holding her head high. Beside her, Levi wanted desperately to take her hand, to offer comfort, but the bailiff kept them separated. "Your Honor," Bishop Yoder spoke up, "this woman has entered into a marriage contract within our community. She has chosen a new life, one of honest work and family devotion." Judge Wilson leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Marriage contracts don't automatically void prior debts, Bishop, but they should protect against false claims," Levi said quietly. The judge turned to him, noting his injuries. "These men care nothing for justice or debts. They seek only profit through threats and force." The courtroom had grown still, the townsfolk listening intently. Even those who had gossiped about Olivia's size or Levi's curse seemed moved. By the sight of their united stand, Henry stepped forward again. "Among my people, we say a person's worth is measured by their actions, not their debts. I have watched this woman work harder than any of her critics. Seen her love a child who needed healing. That should count for something, even in your law." The judge drummed his fingers on his desk, visibly torn between the letter of the law and the spirit of justice before him. Finally he cleared his throat. "Mrs. Stoltzfus," he said formally, causing Olivia's eyes to widen at the official acknowledgement of her married name. "Please take the stand. I would hear your testimony before making my decision." Olivia rose slowly, her chains clinking in the hushed courtroom. As she moved toward the witness stand, her eyes met Levi's. In that brief glance past all their shared hopes for family, for belonging, for a future built on trust and steadfast love. The judge leaned forward as Olivia settled into the chair. "Now then, Mrs. Stoltzfus, tell us your story." Olivia's hands trembled as she settled into the witness chair, but her voice rang clear through the crowded courtroom. Judge Wilson adjusted his spectacles, studying her with keen interest. "Tell us, Mrs. Stoltzfus, how you came to be here." She straightened her plain dress, lifting her chin. "I came west as a mail-order bride, Your Honor, by choice. Not running from debts, but running toward hope," one of the bounty riders snorted. But the judge silenced him with a sharp look. "My father died owing money," Olivia continued, her words measured and dignified. "But I am not his debt. I am a woman who has found her place, her purpose." She turned slightly, looking directly at Levi and Anna. "I am a wife who tends a hearth that was cold. I am a mother who holds a child who needed holding." Anna pressed closer to Levi's side, her small fingers gripping his sleeve. The morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, catching the tears that trembled but didn't fall from Olivia's eyes. "In 3 weeks, I have built more than just bread and butter," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I have built trust with a child who feared trusting. I have earned respect from a man who doubted respect would come again." She paused, drawing a deep breath. "I have made a family from the ashes of loneliness. Your Honor, that is worth more than any paper these men hold." The courtroom had fallen completely silent. Even the usual creaking of wooden benches had stilled, as if the whole room held its breath. Judge Wilson leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "What of your duties to your father's creditors?" he asked quietly, Olivia's hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I honor my father's memory, sir, but I am not property to be claimed. I am family. I am the mother Anna calls for in the night. I am the wife who works beside her husband in the fields." Her voice cracked but held steady. These men do not seek justice. They seek profit from human misery. The first bounty rider surged to his feet. Contracts are contracts, Your Honor. Fine words don't pay debts. We have rights. Rights you purchase for pennies on the dollar. Henry interrupted from his place near the front. To exploit for your own gain. The rider's face reddened. We ain't here for some Indian's opinion. You will show respect in my courtroom. Judge Wilson snapped, his gavel cracking sharply. Or you'll find yourself cooling your heels in the jail. The second rider tugged his partner back down, but their mask of legitimacy had cracked. Their greed showed plainly now in their sneering faces and barely contained anger. Olivia's voice filled the tense silence that followed. I do not deny my father's debts existed, but I deny these men's right to own my future, to tear me from the family I have chosen. She looked around the courtroom, meeting the eyes of the townspeople who had once whispered about her size, her plainness. I am not property. I am not a burden to be sold. I am a woman who has found her place in God's world, and I will not be moved from it. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Even some of those who had gossiped most cruelly about Levi's curse were nodding now. Moved by the quiet strength in Olivia's words, the judge studied the papers before him again, then looked at the bounty riders' increasing agitation. Their facade of legal authority crumbled further with each attempt to interrupt, each angry gesture revealing the true nature of their enterprise. Your Honor, the first rider tried again, regardless of her pretty speech. I believe I have heard enough. Judge Wilson cut him off. He set the papers down deliberately and reached for his gavel. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Levi's hand found Anna's shoulder, squeezing gently. Bishop Yoder straightened in his seat, his stern face softened by hope. Henry stood tall and proud near the rail, his presence a reminder of justice that transcended mere law. Olivia sat very still in the witness chair, her eyes fixed on the judge as he raised his gavel. In that moment, she was no longer the plain, heavy-set woman who had stepped off a train into a world of whispers. She was dignity itself, unshakable in her conviction that love and family could overcome greed and prejudice. The gavel hung suspended in the morning light, ready to fall with the weight of judgment. The gavel struck with sharp finality. Judge Wilson's voice filled the hushed courtroom, firm and clear. Under Colorado territorial law, the so-called debt contract is void. No person may be held in bondage for the settlement of another's obligations. He fixed the bounty riders with a stern gaze. Furthermore, I find Mrs. Stoltzfus's marriage to Levi Stoltzfus both legal and binding under frontier statute. The first bounty rider's face twisted with rage. Your Honor, you can't just... I can and I have. Judge Wilson cut him off. And if either of you remain in this county by sundown, you'll face charges of attempted kidnapping. He nodded to the sheriff. See these gentlemen to their horses. The second rider grabbed his partner's arm, forcing him toward the door. Their boots scraped against the wooden floor as they retreated, muttering curses under their breath. The townsfolk watched them go, their whispers now tinged with satisfaction rather than scandal. Olivia remained in the witness chair, her hands trembling slightly as the reality of her freedom sank in. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she held her head high, dignity unbroken. Mama! Anna's cry pierced the murmuring crowd. The little girl broke free from Levi's grasp and ran forward, her small feet pattering across the courthouse floor. Olivia opened her arms just as Anna reached her, catching her up in a fierce embrace. You're staying, Anna sobbed into her shoulder. Yes, my precious girl, Olivia whispered, stroking Anna's hair. God brought me here to stay. God brought me here to stay. Levi made his way forward more slowly, still favoring his bruised ribs. When he reached them, he clasped Olivia's hand tightly in his own. His eyes, usually so guarded, shone with something deeper than gratitude. Henry approached from his place near the rail, pride evident in his bearing. He tipped his hat to Olivia with a slight smile. "You showed true courage today, friend," he said simply. "Your family is stronger for it." Bishop Yoder stepped forward then, his stern face softened by what might have been wonder. "Perhaps," he said quietly, meeting Levi's gaze, "I was hasty in my judgment. It seems God has blessed your household after all." Brother Stoltzfus. The townspeople began filing out, many nodding respectfully to Olivia as they passed. Some even smiled, their previous mockery transformed by her quiet strength and dignity. Outside, the morning sun had burned away the last of the dawn chill. Levi helped Olivia and Anna into their wagon, his touch gentle despite his injuries. The wooden seat that had felt so strange to Olivia just weeks ago now felt like coming home. As they turned toward their homestead, Anna nestled between them. Olivia felt the last shadows of fear fall away. The long road stretched before them, but they would travel it together now, not as strangers bound by necessity, but as a family forged in faith and strengthened by trial. The wagon wheels creaked a steady rhythm as they left town behind. Their little family had found its foundation at last, built not on mail order promises or legal papers, but on something far stronger: love freely chosen, tested by fire, and proven true. 3 days after the courthouse victory, peace settled over the Stoltzfus homestead like a warm blanket. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting golden squares across the swept wooden floor. The familiar scent of yeast and flour filled the air as Olivia worked at the bread-making table, her strong hands kneading the dough with practiced motions. Anna sat cross-legged on a braided rug near Olivia's feet, carefully arranging her cloth dolls in a circle. She hummed softly, matching the rhythm of Olivia's kneading. Every few minutes, she would glance up at her new mother with a contented smile, as if reassuring herself that Olivia was still there. At the kitchen table, Levi sat with his Bible open before him. His bruises had faded to yellowed shadows, and his posture held none of its former tension. His deep voice filled the kitchen as he read from James, each word measured and thoughtful. "Mercy rejoiceth against judgment," he read, then paused, letting the words settle in the warm air. He looked up at Olivia, his eyes soft with understanding. They both knew how mercy had triumphed in their own story. Olivia dusted flour from her hands and began shaping the dough into loaves. "That verse speaks true," she said quietly. "Sometimes the hardest mercy is the one we show ourselves." Anna abandoned her dolls and came to watch the bread making. "Can I help, Mama?" she asked, the word Mama flowing naturally now, like it had always belonged on her tongue. "Here," Olivia smiled, cutting off a small piece of dough. "You can make your own little loaf." As evening approached, the kitchen filled with the aroma of baking bread and simmering stew. The family gathered around the table, now marked by 3 well-worn places instead of 2 lonely settings. Olivia ladled out portions while Levi sliced the fresh bread, its crust crackling invitingly. Their supper was different from the silent meals of weeks past. Stories and laughter flowed freely between them. Anna told tales from her day's adventures in the garden, her hands gesturing excitedly. Olivia shared memories of her own childhood games, while Levi's actually chuckled at their playful banter. "Remember when the chickens chased you yesterday, Papa?" Anna giggled, reaching for another piece of bread. "Ah, those hens have gotten mighty bold since your mother started feeding them extra corn," Levi replied with mock seriousness, but his eyes twinkled. After the dishes were cleared and washed, they gathered in the sitting room. The lamp cast a warm circle of light around them, making shadows dance on the walls. Anna curled naturally into Olivia's lap, her small form fitting perfectly against the curve she had once feared would make her unlovable. Levi sat beside them in his chair, close enough that his knee brushed Olivia's skirts. The distance that had marked their early days had vanished, replaced by comfortable intimacy. His smile, once so rare, now came easily in the peaceful evening. Outside, cricket song filled the night air. No hoof beats disturbed the quiet. No shadows lurked at the edge of their land. The threats that had haunted them had been banished by justice and community, leaving only peace in their wake. Levi's expression grew thoughtful as he watched his wife and daughter together. Olivia stroked Anna's hair, humming the same hymn that had sustained them through their trials. The girl's eyes grew heavy with sleep, but she fought to keep them open, savoring every moment of security. "Let us pray," Levi said softly. Reaching for both their hands, they bowed their heads together, connected by touch and trust. Levi's prayer rose quiet but firm in the lamplight. "Lord," he whispered, "we thank you not just for delivering us from trouble, though we are grateful. Most of all, we thank you for the gift of steadfast love that refused to leave when the path grew dark. For bringing us Olivia, whose strength has made us whole. For showing us that family is built not just by blood, but by choice and faith and endurance." Anna's breathing had grown even with sleep, but Olivia's hand tightened in Levi's as she whispered, "Amen." The lamp burned low, but the home glowed with something brighter than mere light. What had once been hollow was now filled with love, laughter, and the warm certainty of belonging. They had found their way home at last, not to a place, but to each other. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.